A healthy feeling of inferiority is not something that comes from comparing oneself to others, but from one's comparison with one's ideal self. These words from Ichiro Kishimi, co-author of the international bestseller The Courage to be Disliked, challenge everything we think we know about motivation, self-improvement, and personal growth. In our hyper-connected world of social media highlights and constant comparison, this insight feels revolutionary. But what does it really mean to have a healthy feeling of inferiority? And how can comparing ourselves to an ideal version of ourselves be more beneficial than measuring our progress against others? Today, we're going to dive deep into this transformative concept that could completely change how you approach personal development and find genuine motivation for growth. Who is Ichiro Kishimi? Before we explore this quote, let's understand who Ichiro Kishimi is and why his words carry such weight. Kishimi is a Japanese philosopher and psychologist who has spent decades studying and teaching Adlerian psychology. He's best known for co-authoring The Courage to be Disliked with Fumitake Koga, a book that has sold millions of copies worldwide and introduced Adlerian principles to a modern audience. Kishimi's work is grounded in the teachings of Alfred Adler, the Austrian psychologist who founded individual psychology. Adler believed that humans are driven by a desire to overcome feelings of inferiority and strive for superiority, not over others, but over their previous selves. This background is crucial because Kishimi's quote isn't just philosophical wisdom. It's based on decades of psychological research and practical application in helping people live more fulfilling lives. The problem with comparison culture. Let's start by examining what Kishimi means by unhealthy inferiority feelings, those that come from comparing ourselves to others. In today's world, we're constantly bombarded with opportunities for comparison. Social media feeds show us carefully curated highlights of other people's lives. Professional networks display everyone's achievements and promotions. Even casual conversations can trigger that familiar sting of, "They're doing better than me." This type of comparison creates what psychologists call relative inferiority, a feeling that we're lacking not because we haven't grown, but because someone else appears to be ahead of us. This leads to several destructive patterns. The endless race. When we compare ourselves to others, we enter a race with no finish line. There will always be someone who appears more successful, more attractive, more talented, or more accomplished. This creates chronic dissatisfaction and anxiety. External validation dependency. We begin to measure our worth by external metrics, likes, followers, salary figures, titles. Our self-esteem becomes hostage to factors largely outside our control. The imposter syndrome trap. Constantly measuring ourselves against others can make us feel like frauds, even when we've achieved genuine success. We assume others are naturally gifted while we're just getting lucky. Resentment and envy. Comparison culture breeds negative emotions toward others. Instead of celebrating others' successes, we see them as threats to our own self-worth. Analysis paralysis. When we're focused on what others are doing, we can become paralyzed by indecision, constantly second-guessing our choices based on what seems to be working for others. The fundamental problem with this approach is that it makes our self-worth dependent on variables we can't control. Other people's lives, circumstances, and choices. Understanding healthy inferiority. Now let's explore what Kishimi means by a healthy feeling of inferiority. At first glance, this might seem like an oxymoron. How can feeling inferior ever be healthy? The key lies in understanding that Kishimi isn't talking about self-deprecation or low self-esteem. Instead, he's referring to what Adlerian psychology calls creative inferiority. The recognition of the gap between who we are now and who we could become. This healthy inferiority has several characteristics. Self-referential. It's about comparing your current self to your potential self, not to other people. You're running your own race on your own track. Growth-oriented. Rather than leading to despair or resignation, healthy inferiority creates motivation for improvement. It's the recognition that you have room to grow, which is exciting rather than defeating. Realistic. It's based on an honest assessment of your current abilities and circumstances, not on unrealistic expectations or external pressures. Constructive. It leads to action and learning rather than rumination and self-criticism. Personal, it's aligned with your own values, goals, and definition of success, rather than society's or others' expectations. Think of it this way: a healthy feeling of inferiority is like looking at a mountain you want to climb. You acknowledge that you're currently at the base, inferiority, but rather than being discouraged, you're energized by the journey ahead. You're not worried about how fast other climbers are moving or what route they're taking. You're focused on your own path to the summit. The concept of the ideal self, central to Kishimi's quote, is the concept of the ideal self. But what exactly does this mean, and how is it different from unrealistic fantasies or perfectionist standards? The ideal self, in Adlerian psychology, represents the best version of who you can realistically become, given your unique circumstances, values, and potential. It's not about becoming someone else or achieving impossible standards. It's about becoming the fullest expression of who you are. Your ideal self is personal. Your ideal self is uniquely yours. It's not based on someone else's achievements or society's definitions of success. It reflects your own values, interests, and natural inclinations. Your ideal self is realistic. While it represents growth and improvement, your ideal self is grounded in reality. It considers your actual circumstances, resources, and limitations, while still pushing you toward growth. Your ideal self is dynamic. As you grow and change, your understanding of your ideal self evolves too. It's not a fixed destination, but a moving target that keeps you engaged in lifelong learning and development. Your ideal self is holistic. It encompasses all areas of your life, not just career or financial success, but relationships, health, creativity, contribution to others, and personal fulfillment. To illustrate this, consider a musician who dreams of performing at Carnegie Hall. If this dream is based on genuine passion for music and represents the fullest expression of their musical abilities, it could be part of their ideal self. However, if this dream is primarily motivated by a desire to impress others or achieve status, it might be more about unhealthy comparison than authentic growth. The ideal self serves as a North Star. It provides direction and motivation while remaining personally meaningful and achievable through dedicated effort. The psychology behind this approach. Why is comparing ourselves to our ideal self more effective than comparing ourselves to others? The answer lies in several key psychological principles. Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. When we compare ourselves to our ideal self, we tap into intrinsic motivation, the satisfaction that comes from growth, mastery, and purpose. This type of motivation is more sustainable and fulfilling than extrinsic motivation, which depends on external rewards or recognition. The locus of control. Psychologists distinguish between internal and external locus of control. When we focus on our ideal self, we maintain an internal locus of control. We believe our actions and efforts determine our outcomes. Comparing ourselves to others shifts us toward an external locus of control, making us feel powerless and dependent on circumstances beyond our influence. Growth mindset. Carol Dweck's research on mindset shows that people who believe abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work tend to achieve more than those who believe talents are fixed. Focusing on your ideal self naturally cultivates a growth mindset because it emphasizes development and potential rather than current limitations. Self-determination theory. This psychological framework identifies three basic needs for human motivation: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Comparing ourselves to our ideal self supports all three. We choose our own path, autonomy. We focus on developing skills, competence. And we can still maintain positive relationships without seeing others as competition, relatedness. Reduced cognitive load. When we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, we expend enormous mental energy tracking, analyzing, and reacting to external information. Focusing on our ideal self simplifies our mental processes and allows us to channel energy toward productive action. These psychological principles explain why Kishimi's approach is not just philosophically appealing, but scientifically sound. Practical applications. Understanding Kishimi's wisdom is one thing, applying it in daily life is another. Let's explore practical strategies for developing a healthy relationship with inferiority and connecting with your ideal self. Step 1. Define your ideal self. Start by getting clear on who you want to become. This isn't about listing achievements or possessions, but about identifying the qualities, capabilities, and characteristics of your best self. Values. Clarification. What do you truly value? Not what you think you should value, but what genuinely matters to you. Your ideal self should embody these values. Strengths. Development. What are your natural talents and strengths? Your ideal self likely represents the full development and application of these gifts. Life areas. Assessment. Consider different areas of your life: health, relationships, career, personal growth, contribution to others. What would each area look like in your ideal life? Future self-visualization. Imagine yourself 5 or 10 years from now, having grown in all the ways that matter to you. What does this person look like? How do they think, act, and respond to challenges? Step 2. Create comparison-free zones. Actively reduce opportunities for unhealthy comparison. Social media boundaries. Consider unfollowing accounts that trigger comparison. Follow accounts that inspire growth rather than envy. News and media consumption. Be mindful of how much time you spend consuming information about others' achievements or lifestyles. Conversation awareness. Notice when conversations turn to comparing people or achievements. Gently redirect toward growth-focused discussions. Step 3. Develop self-referential metrics. Instead of measuring yourself against others, create personal metrics based on your own growth. Progress tracking. Keep a journal of your growth in areas that matter to you. Celebrate improvements, no matter how small. Skill development. Focus on developing capabilities rather than achieving specific outcomes. Ask, am I getting better? Rather than, am I the best? Values. Alignment. Regularly assess whether your actions align with your values. This internal compass is more reliable than external validation. Step 4. Reframe inferiority feelings. When you notice feelings of inadequacy, pause and reflect. Ask yourself, am I comparing myself to others or to my ideal self? Redirect focus. If you're comparing to others, consciously shift to considering your own growth potential. Embrace the gap. See the distance between your current and ideal self as exciting territory to explore, rather than evidence of failure. Take action. Use these feelings as fuel for learning and improvement, rather than self-criticism. Step 5. Celebrate others without comparison. You can appreciate others' achievements without making it about yourself. Genuine celebration. Practice being genuinely happy for others' successes without calculating how it affects your own standing. Learning opportunity. When you see someone excelling, ask, what can I learn from this? Rather than, why can't I do that? Collaboration over competition. Look for ways to collaborate or learn from people you might have previously seen as competition. Common obstacles and how to overcome them. Even with understanding and intention, applying Kashimi's wisdom can be challenging. Here are common obstacles and strategies for overcoming them. Perfectionism. Some people turn their ideal self into a perfectionist standard, which defeats the purpose. Remember that your ideal self is about growth, not perfection. It's okay to fall short sometimes. Impatience. Growth takes time, and it's easy to become frustrated with the pace of progress. Focus on the process rather than the timeline. Every step forward matters. Social pressure. Friends, family, or colleagues might continue to engage in comparison culture. You can be supportive without participating in the comparison game. Old habits. Comparison thinking is often deeply ingrained. Be patient with yourself as you develop new mental habits. Notice comparison thoughts without judgment and gently redirect. Fear of mediocrity. Some worry that without competition with others, they'll become complacent. In reality, people who focus on their ideal self often achieve more because their motivation is sustainable and authentic. The transformation that awaits. When you embrace Kashimi's approach to healthy inferiority, profound changes begin to occur. Inner peace. You stop being at war with yourself and others. There's a deep peace that comes from running your own race, sustainable motivation. Instead of motivation that comes from fear or competition, you develop lasting drive based on genuine growth and self-expression. better relationships. When you're not comparing yourself to others, you can celebrate their successes and build genuine connections. Authentic success. Your achievements feel more meaningful because they align with your true values and potential, rather than external expectations. Resilience. Setbacks become learning opportunities rather than evidence of failure because you're focused on long-term growth rather than immediate comparisons. Continuous growth. You develop a love of learning and improvement that lasts a lifetime because it's intrinsically motivated. The journey from comparison-based thinking to ideal self-focus is not always easy, but it's one of the most valuable transformations you can make. Ichiro Kishimi's insight that a healthy feeling of inferiority is not something that comes from comparing oneself to others, but from one's comparison with one's ideal self, offers us a roadmap to authentic growth and lasting fulfillment. In a world obsessed with rankings, metrics, and social comparison, choosing to focus on your ideal self is a radical act of self-compassion and wisdom. It's choosing growth over competition, authenticity over approval, and inner peace over external validation. Your ideal self is waiting for you, not as a distant, impossible dream, but as a realistic vision of who you can become through dedicated effort and intentional growth. The gap between who you are now and who you could become isn't a source of shame. It's a source of excitement and energy. The question isn't whether you measure up to others. The question is whether you're becoming who you're capable of being. And that journey, uniquely yours, is where true fulfillment lies. Start today. Define your ideal self, embrace the healthy inferiority that motivates growth, and begin the most important competition of your life, the one between who you are now and who you can become.